Maya walked quietly through the long hall of the mansion, her footsteps light against the polished marble floor. The house was filled with beauty, large paintings, golden frames, tall glass windows, but none of it brought peace to her heart. Every day she cleaned, dusted, and worked from morning until night, but her mind was never fully here. It was always somewhere else. It was always with her son, David. David was only 10 years old, yet his body was weak and fragile. He was often in bed, coughing, breathing with difficulty, and crying softly at night. The doctors had given Maya a clear answer: David needed urgent treatment, something that could give him a chance to live, but it was very expensive. Too expensive for someone like Maya. She had worked in this mansion for nearly 5 years. She cooked, cleaned, washed clothes, polished silver, and sometimes even stayed late into the night when the staff was short. Her wages were enough to pay for food and rent, but not more. Every coin she saved went to medicines, and still, it was not enough. When Maya left for work each morning, she always stopped at David's small bed. She touched his thin hand, kissed his forehead, and whispered the same words: "Be strong, my son. Mama will find a way." But inside, her heart was breaking. The mansion belonged to Mr. Adrian, a man of great wealth and power. He was known in the city as a billionaire who owned many companies, yet those who worked for him knew his other side. He was strict, cold, and rarely smiled. He spoke little to the staff, except when giving orders. Some said he had no family. Some whispered that he lived only for business. For Maya, he was just her employer. She respected him, but she never tried to speak to him more than needed. After all, what could a poor maid say to a man who lived in a world so far from hers? Still, there were moments when Maya wondered about him. Sometimes she saw him sitting alone at night by the fireplace, staring at an old photograph he kept near his chair. His face would soften then, but only for a moment. By morning, the cold mask would return. Maya's own mask was harder to keep. At work, she tried to smile. She tried to hide her tears when other maids joked or laughed in the kitchen. She told herself that crying would not help her son. But at night, when she returned home, the truth always came. Their home was small, just 2 rooms in an old building. David's bed was beside the window, where he could watch the street even when he was too weak to play outside. Maya would sit beside him, feeding him soup, brushing his hair, telling him stories to make him smile. But lately, David had stopped smiling. "Mama," he whispered one night, his voice thin as a feather. "Will I get better?" Maya held his hand tightly. She wanted to answer with courage, but her voice trembled. "Yes, my son. You will. Mama will never let anything happen to you." He looked at her with tired eyes, then closed them, falling back into restless sleep. That night, Maya could not sleep at all. She sat by the window, staring at the dark street outside. Her mind kept repeating the doctor's words: "If we don't begin treatment soon, it may be too late." She thought about her wages. She thought about the little money hidden in a small box under her bed. It was enough for food for a few weeks, maybe a little medicine, but not the treatment. Not the operation. Her heart ached. She was his mother. She was supposed to protect him, to give him a future. But what could she do? At dawn, Maya returned to the mansion, tired but determined to keep working. She cleaned the stairs, washed the dishes, and served tea as if nothing was wrong. Yet inside, every moment was heavy with fear. She began to notice things more closely now. The richness of the house seemed louder to her eyes. The gold frames, the crystal lamps, the endless rooms filled with things no one used. She thought of how a single painting on the wall could pay for David's treatment. Her hands trembled once as she polished a silver vase. She whispered a prayer in her heart: "Please, God, show me a way. Don't let me lose him." The other maids never knew her struggle. They talked about dresses, holidays, and gossip about Mr. Adrian. Maya only nodded politely but never joined. She carried her secret pain alone. At night, when she returned home again, she found David weaker. His skin was pale, and his breathing shallow. She sat beside him, tears falling onto his blanket. She held his hand and whispered, "I will save you, no matter what it takes. Even if the whole world turns against me, I will not let you go." And with those words, something inside her changed. Maya no longer felt only fear. She felt a strange kind of strength, born from love. She did not know how, but she knew one thing for certain: she would do whatever it took to save her son. Even if it meant walking down a dangerous path. Mr. Adrian's mansion stood tall on the edge of the city, a symbol of power and wealth. From the outside, people admired it, whispering about the man who lived there. To most, Adrian was a figure of success, someone who had everything. But to those who worked inside, he was also a mystery. Adrian was not like other rich men who enjoyed parties, friends, or laughter. He lived in silence. Every morning, he left in his black car, heading to his companies. Every evening, he returned alone, walking through the wide doors of his mansion with heavy steps. He spoke little to his staff, only giving short instructions. His face was always serious, his eyes sharp, his heart hidden behind a wall no one could break. The mansion, despite its beauty, felt cold. The lights shone brightly, the rooms were filled with fine furniture, but there was no warmth. The laughter of children never echoed in its halls, and the sound of joy never touched its walls. It was a house of riches but not a home. The staff often whispered among themselves. Some said Adrian had lost his family long ago. Others said he never wanted one. No one knew the full truth, and no one dared to ask. Maya, as one of the maids, saw more than most. She noticed the small details that others ignored. She saw the way Adrian's eyes lingered on the fireplace late at night, how his hand often reached for the same photograph that sat in a silver frame. It was a picture of a little boy. Maya did not know who the boy was, but she saw the softness in Adrian's eyes whenever he looked at it. His lips would tighten, and his shoulders would sink slightly, as if a great weight pressed down on him. For a few seconds, he did not look like a billionaire at all. He looked like a man who had lost something too precious to name. One evening, the mansion was unusually quiet. Most of the staff had gone home, leaving only a few behind to finish their duties. Maya stayed late that night, dusting the study. Through the open door, she saw Adrian sitting in his armchair, the glow of the fireplace lighting his face. In his hand was the photograph. He held it gently, like a treasure, though his expression was heavy with sorrow. Maya paused in the hallway. For a moment, she forgot her own pain and simply watched him. She wondered what story hid behind his cold eyes. Was the boy in the picture his son? If so, where was he now? Adrian suddenly sighed, a long breath that seemed to come from deep inside. He set the photograph back on the table and leaned back in his chair, staring at the flames. His face looked tired, older than his years. Maya quickly lowered her head and stepped away before he noticed her. She returned to her work, but the image of him sitting alone stayed in her mind. Despite his riches, Adrian seemed lonelier than anyone she had ever met. The next morning, the routine continued. Adrian sat at the long dining table, where a meal for 10 people was served though only he ate. He sipped his coffee silently while Maya and another maid served dishes he barely touched. His eyes remained distant, his mind somewhere else. "Take these away," he said softly, after only a few minutes. Maya bowed her head, clearing the plates. She wondered if he ever truly tasted the food prepared for him or if he ate only out of duty. The rest of the day passed as usual. Adrian met his assistant in his office, signed papers, made phone calls, and gave instructions. His voice was always calm, never raised, but it carried authority. No one questioned him. No one argued. To the outside world, this was a powerful man in control of everything. But Maya, watching from the shadows, could see the emptiness in his eyes. Sometimes she thought about how different their lives were. He lived in a mansion filled with wealth, while she lived in a small rented room. He could buy anything he wanted, while she counted every coin before spending. Yet, in some strange way, they were alike. Both of them carried pain. Both of them lived with a weight that never left. Maya's weight was her sick son, David. Adrian's weight was a mystery, but Maya felt certain it had to do with the little boy in the photograph. Late one night, after most of the staff had left, Maya again passed by the study. Adrian was there, sitting in the same armchair, staring at the same picture. The firelight danced across his face, and for the first time, Maya noticed tears in his eyes. She stopped, shocked. She had never imagined the billionaire could cry. Quickly, she turned away and walked down the hall, her heart heavy. She realized then that behind his cold mask, Adrian was human too. A man with wounds. A man with secrets. And though she did not know it yet, their lives were moving toward a moment that would change everything for her son, and even for Adrian himself. The days passed like falling sand, each one slipping away too quickly for Maya. At the mansion, she worked hard, polishing floors and serving meals, but her mind never stayed there. Her thoughts were always with David. His condition was growing worse. The medicines no longer gave him strength. His body was thinner, his cheeks pale, and his coughs deeper. At night, Maya stayed awake, listening to his breathing, terrified that one night it might stop. One afternoon, she hurried to the hospital after finishing her work early. She begged the doctor for hope. "Doctor, please," she said, her hands tightly clasped. "Tell me what I can do. He is all I have." The doctor looked at her kindly, but his words were heavy. "Your son needs treatment very soon. Without it, I fear he may not last long. The treatment is costly, but it will give him a chance." "How much?" Maya whispered, though she already knew it would be far beyond her reach. The doctor told her the amount, and her heart sank. It was more money than she could earn in many years. She left the hospital with her eyes filled with tears, her steps unsteady. That evening, she sat beside David, brushing his hair back gently as he tried to sleep. He looked up at her with weak eyes. "Mama, don't cry," he said softly. "I will be fine." Maya forced a smile, though inside she felt broken. "Yes, my son. You will be fine. I promise you." But she knew promises would not heal him. Only money could bring the treatment, and money was the one thing she did not have. The next day, Maya returned to the mansion. She cleaned the halls, dusted the shelves, and washed the tall glass windows. Yet, inside, she felt like a storm was rising. Every second reminded her that time was running out. That night, she was assigned to clean Mr. Adrian's study. It was a large room filled with books, dark wood shelves, and fine furniture. The desk stood tall in the center, covered with files, pens, and papers. As Maya dusted carefully, her eyes fell on a half-open drawer. She bent down to close it, but what she saw inside made her freeze. Stacks of cash. Neatly arranged bundles of money, shining under the desk light. Her hands trembled. She quickly looked around the room. No one was there. Only silence and the sound of her own breathing. She knew what the money was for. She had heard the staff talk earlier. It was a large sum set aside for a charity donation Adrian planned to give at the end of the week. Maya's heart pounded in her chest. For a long moment, she stood frozen, staring at the drawer. Her mind began to race. With this money, David could get the treatment. With this money, he could live. But then another thought struck her: it is not mine. If I take it, it is stealing. What will happen if they find out? What will happen to me? Her hands gripped the edge of the desk. She could almost hear David's weak voice in her ears, calling, "Mama." Tears filled her eyes. She whispered to herself, "What do I do? What do I do?" For years, she had lived an honest life. She had never taken what did not belong to her. But now, honesty felt like a chain around her neck, dragging her down as her son's life slipped away. She thought of the doctor's words, "soon, or too late." She thought of David's thin hands and his tired smile. Slowly, with shaking fingers, she reached into the drawer and touched the money. Her body felt cold, her breath shallow. "This is wrong," she whispered, pulling her hand back. But then she thought again, "If I don't take it, I will lose him forever." She closed her eyes, and a tear rolled down her cheek. Then, in one quick motion, she gathered the bundles, hid them under her cleaning cloth, and pressed them tightly against her chest. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure someone would hear. She moved quickly, leaving the study, her steps uneven, her face pale. That night, she rushed to the hospital. She gave the money to the doctor, her hands still trembling. "Please," she begged, "start his treatment at once." The doctor looked surprised at how quickly she had gathered the sum, but he asked no questions. He nodded and said, "We will do everything we can." As David was taken into the treatment room, Maya sat outside on the bench, her hands covering her face. She was crying, but not only from fear, there was also relief. She had crossed a line she never thought she would, but she told herself it was worth it. She told herself she would carry the guilt if it meant saving her son. Still, deep inside, her heart whispered a warning: what if he finds out? What if Adrian discovers the truth? But Maya pushed the thought away. For now, all that mattered was David. She whispered to herself, "Forgive me, God. Forgive me, Mr. Adrian. I did this only for my child." And with that, she sat through the night, waiting for the doctors, waiting for news, waiting for hope. The next morning, the mansion buzzed with quiet tension. Something was wrong. The staff whispered among themselves as they moved through the halls, their eyes filled with worry. In the study, Mr. Adrian stood tall, his face darker than anyone had seen before. The drawer of his desk was open, and the bundles of money that had been carefully placed there were gone. "Who did this?" His voice was calm but sharp like a blade. The butler, the cooks, and the maids all stood in a line, their heads lowered. No one dared to speak. No one dared to meet his eyes. "It was a large sum," Adrian continued. "Money I prepared for a special donation. It disappeared last night. One of you has taken it." The silence grew heavy. Maya stood among the maids, her heart pounding wildly. She could feel her palms sweating, her throat dry. She wanted to disappear, but she could not. She told herself to breathe, to stay still. "No one saw me. No one knows." Adrian's sharp gaze moved from one face to another. His eyes lingered on each person, searching for a sign of guilt. "I will find the truth," he said firmly. "And when I do, there will be consequences." Maya lowered her head further, afraid that her eyes might betray her. She clutched her apron tightly, praying silently. "Please, God, let him not know. Please let him not see." The staff was dismissed after a few minutes, but Adrian did not let the matter rest. He called his private investigator, a man who had worked for him for many years. "Search carefully," Adrian ordered. "I want to know who touched that drawer. Leave no detail unnoticed." That day, Maya could hardly work. Every sound made her jump. Every footstep behind her made her heart race. She washed the dishes with trembling hands and nearly dropped a glass. The other maids looked at her curiously, but she forced herself to smile weakly. At night, she rushed back to the hospital. David had begun his treatment, and though still weak, he looked more peaceful. His chest rose and fell with steadier breaths. "Mama," he whispered when he opened his eyes, "thank you for not leaving me." Maya bent down, kissing his forehead. "I will never leave you, my son." Tears filled her eyes. She told herself again that she had done the right thing. Even if the world turned against her, she would not regret saving her child. But the fear never left her. It followed her back into the mansion like a shadow. Days passed, and Adrian grew more restless. The investigator came back with a report. "Sir, we checked the cameras, but the angle does not show the desk clearly. However, we found signs that one of the staff stayed in your study longer than usual that night." Adrian leaned forward. "Who?" The investigator paused. "Maya, the maid." The name struck like lightning. Adrian remembered her, the quiet woman with tired eyes who never spoke much. He had noticed her sometimes working late, her face pale but determined. "Bring her to me," Adrian said. That evening, Maya was summoned to Adrian's study. She entered with shaking hands, her heart racing. Adrian sat behind his desk, the fire glowing behind him, his eyes cold and unreadable. "Maya," he began slowly, "I want you to tell me the truth. Did you take the money from this drawer?" Maya's knees grew weak. She wanted to deny it, to shake her head and walk away. But when she opened her mouth, no words came. Tears filled her eyes, and she fell to her knees. "Yes," she whispered, her voice breaking. "It was me." The room fell silent. The fire crackled softly, but no one spoke. "I did it for my son," she cried, pressing her hands together. "He is dying. The doctors said he will not live without treatment. I had no choice, sir. I am sorry. I am so sorry." Adrian stared at her, his expression unreadable. The other staff had expected him to shout, to call the police, to end her job at once. But he did none of those things. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Your son?" he asked. Maya nodded quickly, tears running down her face. "Yes. His name is David. He is only 10 years old. Please, sir. I beg you to understand. I did not want to steal. But I could not watch him suffer." Her voice broke as she whispered, "He is all I have." For a long moment, Adrian said nothing. His face softened just a little, and something flickered in his eyes, something no one had seen in years. Finally, he spoke in a low voice. "Take me to him." Maya's head shot up, her eyes wide with surprise. She thought she had heard wrong. "Sir," she whispered. "Take me to your son," Adrian repeated firmly. And with those words, the air in the room changed. The other staff looked at one another, shocked. No one could understand what Adrian was thinking. Why was the cold billionaire asking to see a maid's child? But Maya knew this moment would change everything. She wiped her tears quickly, stood trembling, and nodded. "Yes, sir. I will take you." Inside her chest, fear and hope clashed together, leaving her breathless. The night was quiet when Maya led Mr. Adrian out of the mansion. Her hands trembled as she clutched her shawl tightly around her shoulders. She could hardly believe what was happening. A few hours ago, she had confessed her worst secret, expecting anger, punishment, or even the end of her job. Instead, the billionaire had spoken words she never imagined: "Take me to your son." Maya's small apartment was far from the world of shining glass and marble halls. The car stopped at the narrow street, and Adrian stepped out, his sharp eyes scanning the old buildings around him. For a man used to wealth, it must have looked strange. But he said nothing. He simply followed Maya up the stairs, his footsteps steady, his face unreadable. When Maya opened the door, the faint smell of medicine and warm soup filled the air. David lay on a small bed near the window, his little chest rising and falling with effort. His eyes fluttered open at the sound of the door. "Mama," he whispered, his weak voice soft as air. Then his gaze fell on Adrian, the tall figure standing silently beside his mother. Who is this man?" Maya knelt beside him, smoothing his hair gently. Her throat tightened. "This is Mr. Adrian. He is my employer." David blinked slowly, trying to understand. "The man from the big house." Adrian stepped closer, his eyes fixed on the boy. For the first time in years, something inside him moved, something long buried. David's pale face, his small hands gripping the blanket, reminded Adrian of another child he once held in his arms. Adrian cleared his throat, his voice unusually soft. "Yes, I live in the big house." He paused, then asked gently, "How are you feeling, son?" David gave a faint smile, though his lips trembled. "Tired, but Mama says I will be fine." Maya lowered her head, tears filling her eyes. She had promised him again and again, even when she herself had no hope. Adrian turned to her, his voice low. "The treatment has started?" She nodded quickly. "Yes, sir." Because of the money, her voice broke. "I know I was wrong to take it. But please, I beg you, don't stop his treatment. He needs more time. If you want, you can punish me, but let him live." Maya's knees gave way, and she knelt before him. Her hands shook as she clasped them together. "I will accept anything. Just don't take this chance away from him." For a long moment, the room was filled with silence. The only sound was David's weak breathing. Adrian's eyes moved from Maya's trembling hands to her tear-streaked face. Then, slowly, he looked back at the boy. In that moment, memories flooded his mind. His own son, his laughter, his bright eyes, his small arms around his neck. And then the hospital room, the beeping machines, the day he had lost everything. Adrian's heart, hardened for so long, cracked open. Finally, he spoke. His voice was quiet but firm. "Stand up, Maya. You do not need to beg." Maya lifted her tearful eyes, confused. Adrian knelt slightly to meet David's gaze. "You are very brave," he said gently. "And your mother is the bravest woman I have ever seen. She did what any parent would do. She risked everything for you." David smiled faintly, his eyes closing again. "Mama never leaves me." Adrian's chest tightened. He turned to Maya. "From today, you will not carry this burden alone. I will take responsibility for your son's treatment. Whatever he needs, he will have." Maya gasped. She covered her mouth with both hands, her tears falling freely. "Sir, I don't deserve this kindness. I stole from you. I betrayed your trust." Adrian shook his head. "You did not betray me. You fought for your child's life. That is something I understand better than you know." Maya stared at him, her heart beating fast. She had always thought of Adrian as cold, unreachable, like a stone statue. But now, she saw something different in his eyes: pain, yes, but also compassion. That night, Adrian stayed longer than she expected. He asked the doctor questions, arranging for better medicines and proper care. His tone was serious, but his actions were filled with quiet care. When he finally left, Maya walked him to the door. "Sir," she whispered, her voice trembling, "thank you. I don't know how I will ever repay you." Adrian looked at her for a moment, then at the small apartment. "Some debts are not meant to be repaid. Some are meant to be carried together." Maya didn't fully understand, but she nodded. She watched him leave, her heart heavy yet strangely lighter than before. That night, after David fell asleep, Maya sat by the window, staring at the stars. She thought of the risk she had taken, the money she had stolen, the punishment she had expected. Instead, she had found something unexpected, a door opening to hope. But deep inside, she also felt a question growing stronger: why had Adrian changed so suddenly? Why had the cold billionaire chosen mercy instead of anger? She did not know that his heart was carrying its own hidden story, one that connected him to her pain more than she could ever imagine. And soon, that story would be revealed. The days that followed were unlike anything Maya had ever imagined. Each morning, she visited the hospital and found new medicines, better equipment, and doctors who now gave David their full attention. The difference was clear: this was no longer the poor boy forgotten in a corner. This was a child whose life mattered, because someone powerful had decided it should. That someone was Mr. Adrian. He came to the hospital more than once, surprising Maya each time. She never thought a man so busy, so distant, would give time to a maid's son. Yet, there he was, standing quietly in the hospital room, asking the doctors careful questions, his eyes fixed on David with a strange sadness. One afternoon, when the room was quiet and David was resting peacefully, Maya finally gathered her courage. She looked at Adrian and asked softly, "Sir, may I ask you something?" Adrian did not look at her at first. His eyes were on David, watching the boy's chest rise and fall. Then he spoke, his voice calm. "What is it? Why are you helping us?" Maya's words trembled. "You had every right to punish me. You could have thrown me out, or worse. But instead, you came here. You are paying for everything. Why?" Adrian was silent for a long time. His jaw tightened, his hands resting on the chair's arm. Finally, he leaned back and let out a long breath. "Because once, I stood where you stand." Maya blinked, confused. "Sir." Adrian turned his gaze toward the window, his eyes lost in memories. His voice softened, carrying a pain that seemed carved into his soul. "Years ago, I had a son. His name was Daniel. He was bright, full of laughter, the joy of my life. He had eyes like the morning sky and a smile that could fill a room. My wife and I thought we had everything." Maya listened quietly, her heart tightening. "But then Daniel fell sick," Adrian continued. "It came suddenly. One day he was running in the garden, and the next, he was coughing, too weak to stand. The doctors said it was serious. I threw all my money into his treatment. I brought the best doctors, the best machines. But," Adrian's voice broke for a moment. He closed his eyes, and for the first time, Maya saw tears forming. Money could not save him. Maya covered her mouth with her hand. "When he died," Adrian whispered, "my wife left me. She said she could not bear the silence of the house, the memories. I was left alone with wealth that meant nothing. Since then, this mansion, these riches, they are just walls around me. I closed my heart. I told myself feelings were useless." He finally turned to Maya, his eyes glistening. "But when I saw you kneeling before me, begging for your son's life, I saw myself again. I saw the father I once was. And when I looked at your boy, lying there so fragile, I remembered Daniel. I remembered what it feels like to be helpless in front of a child's pain." Maya's tears flowed freely now. She lowered her head, whispering, "I am so sorry, sir. I did not know." Adrian shook his head. "No one knows. I never spoke of it. I buried the memory, locked it away. But your son," he opened the door again. The room grew silent. The only sound was the steady beeping of the monitor beside David's bed. Maya finally spoke, her voice trembling. "Then you understand my choice. You understand why I took the money." I do, Adrian said simply. I cannot blame you. A parent will do anything to protect their child. You showed courage. Perhaps more courage than I did. Maya looked at him in surprise. How could you say that, sir? You did everything you could for your son. Adrian's face hardened. But I let grief turn me into stone. I stopped living. I pushed everyone away. I thought wealth was my shield, but it became my prison. You risked everything, even your honor, to fight for your son. That is not weakness, Maya. That is strength. Maya pressed her hands together, her tears falling silently. She had always seen Adrian as untouchable, a man above her world. But now, she saw a father broken by loss, still carrying scars he had never healed. From that day on, Adrian's visits became more frequent. Sometimes he brought books for David. Sometimes he simply sat by the bed in silence, as if finding peace in the presence of the boy. David, though weak, began to notice. Mama, he whispered one evening, Mr. Adrian is kind. He looks sad, but when he talks to me, I feel he cares. Maya smiled through her tears. Yes, my son. He cares. Weeks passed, and little by little, David grew stronger. His cheeks gained color, his coughs lessened, and his laughter returned in small bursts. Each time he laughed, Adrian's lips curved into a faint smile, as though he had been waiting years to hear such a sound again. For Maya, it was a miracle. She had risked everything, and though fear still lingered, hope now shone brighter. She often caught Adrian watching David with eyes that were both sorrowful and gentle. One evening, as the sun set and golden light filled the hospital room, Adrian said quietly, Maya, your son has given me something I thought I had lost forever. What is that, sir? She asked softly. He looked at David, then back at her. A reason to believe again. Maya's heart ached at his words. She realized then that David was not only healing himself, he was also healing the cold, broken heart of a man who had long forgotten how to feel. Time moved forward like a gentle tide. Days turned into weeks, and with each passing moment, David's health improved. His laughter, once weak and fading, began to fill the hospital room. His cheeks glowed with color again, and his eyes sparkled with life. For Maya, it was like watching a flower bloom after a long winter. Each smile from her son was a gift, each step he took a miracle. She thanked God every night, whispering her gratitude for the second chance she had been given. But deep inside, a question still weighed on her heart. What would happen when David was fully recovered? Would Mr. Adrian forget them once more? Would her life return to the quiet shadows of servanthood, always with the memory of this strange, extraordinary chapter? One afternoon, Adrian asked Maya to meet him in the garden of his mansion. It was the first time since everything had happened that Maya returned there. The tall gates, the shining floors, the endless halls all felt different now. Adrian was waiting by the fountain. His posture was calm, but his eyes carried the same deep thought she had seen before. Maya, he began softly, David's condition is much better now. The doctors say he will recover completely if he continues treatment for a few more months. Maya's eyes filled with tears of joy. Thank you, sir. I cannot express what this means to me. My son's life, it is more than I ever hoped for. Adrian nodded, but then his voice lowered. There is something more I must tell you. Maya's heart beat faster. She stood still, her hands trembling slightly. Adrian took a deep breath. I have been thinking for many days. When Daniel died, my world became empty. I had no reason to live, no reason to give. But then your son came into my life. His smile, his courage, it reminded me of what I lost, but also of what I can still give. Maya whispered, Sir. Adrian's eyes grew softer. I have decided something. I will take responsibility for David's future. His education, his health, his dreams, everything. He will not suffer as I once watched my son suffer. He will have opportunities beyond what money can buy. Maya gasped. Her knees grew weak, and she almost stepped back. Sir, I don't understand. You have already done so much. How can I allow this? Adrian looked at her firmly. Because it is not just for him. It is for me too. Helping David gives me a reason to breathe again. He has healed something inside me that I thought was lost forever. Maya lowered her gaze, her tears falling freely onto her hands. She could not find words. Gratitude and disbelief mixed inside her heart, leaving her silent. Adrian continued, his voice steady. But there is one more thing. Maya, I no longer see you as a maid in my house. You are a mother with courage, a woman who showed me the meaning of sacrifice. I want you to walk with dignity, not with fear. From today, you will not serve in my home as a maid. I will ensure you and your son live with honor. Maya's eyes widened. Sir, you would release me from service. Yes, Adrian said softly. But not release you from my life. If you allow me, I wish to keep you and David close, not as servants, but as family. Maya covered her mouth in shock. For a moment, her world stood still. She had entered Adrian's life as a poor maid desperate to save her son. She had stolen his money, ashamed and afraid. And now, here he was, offering her a place of respect, even calling her family. Sir, I don't deserve this, Maya whispered, her voice shaking. I made a mistake. I betrayed your trust. How can you still? Adrian interrupted gently. Because love and forgiveness are greater than mistakes. You did what any parent would do. And in your choice, you reminded me of the father I used to be. You gave me back my heart. Maya could not hold back her sobs. She knelt, not in shame this time, but in gratitude, pressing her hands together. Thank you, sir. Thank you for seeing me, for seeing my son. Adrian reached down and helped her stand. His touch was kind, steady. No more kneeling, Maya. Stand tall. You are stronger than you know. At that moment, David came running across the garden, his laughter ringing like a bell. He had been allowed to return home for a few days to rest, and seeing him play again felt like the greatest miracle. He ran into Maya's arms, then looked at Adrian with his bright eyes. Mr. Adrian. David said happily. When I grow up, I want to be like you. Adrian's lips curved into a smile. He bent down and touched David's shoulder gently. No, my boy. Be better than me. Be everything you dream to be. And I promise, I will help you reach it. The golden sun bathed the garden as Maya held her son close, her heart overflowing with gratitude. She looked at Adrian, and for the first time, she did not see a billionaire or a master. She saw a man who had once been broken, but who chose to heal through kindness. The shocking decision was not just his promise to support David, it was his choice to let love enter his life again, to create a family from pain and forgiveness. And so, from that day on, Maya and David were no longer shadows in the mansion. They were part of Adrian's world, not by wealth or status, but by the bond of hearts that had learned to trust again.